Okay, John, how did you first hear about the Freedom Rides and decide to go?
In the fall of 1960, I heard through some of my friends that had been involved in the sit-ins in Nashville, Tennessee, that CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, was sponsoring something called the Freedom Ride. I knew it was something that I had to go on because I traveled through the South and I seen the signs that said white waiting, colored waiting, white men, white women, colored women. And I wanted to be part of an effort to change it.
Um, Talk about in your book. You have a great passage about the joy of being accepted on the Freedom Rides.
When I got word that I had been accepted to be part of the Freedom Rides, I was more than excited. I wanted to do what I could to bring down those signs of segregation, those signs, those symbols that told people they could not take a seat any place on a bus or any place on a train, or couldn't use any waiting room or any restroom. I was more than happy, more than pleased when I was accepted to go on the Freedom Rides. I wanted to do what I could to strike a blow against discrimination in public transportation. This was a decision of the United States Supreme Court that we were testing, banning discrimination in public transportation. I have seen it, I have felt it in traveling for almost 4 years between Alabama and Tennessee to school, having to move to the back of the bus, couldn't use the waiting room that I wanted to use, or couldn't use the restroom facilities that I wanted to use.
Talk about how it was for a black person back in '61 to travel, interstate travel in the segregated South. How was it to travel?
Before 1961, it was not easy for people of color to travel. As a matter of fact, it was very dangerous. If you got out of place, or got out of what people call out of line, or you got in the way, you could be arrested, jailed, beaten, maybe even killed. Back in 1960, before 61, it was tough, it was difficult. It was hard to face segregation and racial discrimination, to see those signs that said colored waiting, white waiting, colored men, colored women, white women.
Why was that so upsetting?
To see the signs, to see the symbols of racism, of segregation, and discrimination was an affront, was an insult to our dignity. We had to change it. We had to change it to make it possible for other people to ride with a sense of dignity and with a sense of pride.
Tell me about the letter that you wrote.
When I applied to go on the Freedom Ride in 1960, the fall of 1960, the Freedom Ride was scheduled for 1961, May 1961. I had to write an essay. And I didn't know that much about trying to write an application or essay, but I did it. And it read something like, I'm a senior at American Baptist Theological Seminary and hope to graduate in June. But on the other hand, the Freedom Ride is much more of a challenge to what I believe than a degree. I know that an education is important, and I hope to get one. But at this time, human dignity is the most important thing in my life. This is the most important decision in my whole life, to decide to give up all, if necessary, to the Freedom Ride. That justice and freedom may come to the Deep South. And it was signed, your fellow freedom fighter, John R. Lewis. When I wrote this little essay, I was convinced that I may not return after going on the Freedom Ride. I knew it was a very dangerous mission to get on a Greyhound bus in Washington, D.C., and ride into Virginia, to North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, into Mississippi. I'd never been to Mississippi before. And I remember on that night when we had the last meal at a little Chinese restaurant in Washington, D.C., when we were eating, someone said, "You must eat well. This may be like the Last Supper."
How did it feel on that first day as you head out to the South?
On that first day, boarding that Greyhound bus to travel through the heart of the Deep South, I felt good. I felt happy. I felt liberated. It was like almost like the first time I got arrested, when I had been sitting in Nashville at a lunch counter. I felt free. I had never traveled outside of the Deep South except for once, when I traveled by car from South Alabama to Buffalo. And there were certain places you couldn't stop along the way to get something to eat. You couldn't use the restroom. And so this was the first time in my life that I could do something in addition to the sit-ins, in addition to the standing at the theater, to end segregation in public transportation all across the South. I had never been to Washington, D.C. before. I've never seen the United States Capitol before. But to come to Washington, D.C. in May of 1961, 21 years old, to board a Greyhound bus, to travel through the South, with the possibility of putting my life on the line for something I believe, I was ready. I was like a soldier in a nonviolent army. I was ready.
So you weren't scared?
There come a point with your nonviolent training, through the nonviolent workshops, that you lose all sense of fear. And even you may have some reservation or some hesitation, but you're prepared to go on and face it.
Great, great. In Rock Hill, you had the first sign for you of violence. Tell me that story.
On May 9th, 1961, when my seatmate, white gentleman named Albert Bigelow from Connecticut, the two of us were seated together. We got off of the bus and approached a waiting room that said white waiting. And the moment we started through the door, a group of young white men attacked us, beat us, and left us lying in a pool of blood. And when we were able to get up, local law enforcement individuals came along and said, "Do we want to press charges?" And we said no. We believed in nonviolence. We accepted nonviolence as a way of life, as a way of living. We didn't strike back. We accepted the blows. Because our struggle was not against these young men. Our struggle was against unjust laws, against customs and tradition.
When these men attack you in Rock Hill, did it make you think, well, maybe this isn't going to be so easy, so simple? Because until that time, you had kind of been free of violence, and you had gone through, a good portion of the Upper South, at least, without this violence. Did that change your thinking about what was going to come?
After we had been attacked in Rock Hill and suffered the abuse, the violence, I knew that this was more of the Upper South, and we had to go much further. We had to make it through Georgia. We had to make it through Alabama, and we had to go into Mississippi, and we had to go on to New Orleans. Somehow, in some way, I felt that it was not going to get any better. It probably was going to get worse. Because along the way, a great many people didn't know about the Freedom Rides. And so after one incident occurred, more people heard about the Freedom Rides, and more people would turn out to a bus station and observe what was happening, and that's exactly what happened.
So in a way, there's this good and bad, this push and pull that happens, because now more people know about the Freedom Rides, which is what you want. But on the other hand, more of the white racists of the mob know about the Freedom Rides.
Well, after a particular incident, such as the incident in Rock Hill, and by the time we made it through Georgia and later in Alabama, the nation as a whole knew about the Freedom Ride. I had to lead the Freedom Ride in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and I felt really bad leaving my friends, leaving my colleagues, and not being able to go on the ride on into Georgia and to Alabama. It was a very difficult decision to make, but I had been waiting to go to India, go to East Africa for 2 years. I was very troubled when I heard that the Greyhound bus in Anniston, Alabama had been burned with some of my friends and colleagues. I would have been on that bus. I was one of the original Freedom Riders. So I knew the people that were on the Greyhound bus. I knew the people that were on the Trailway bus. It was 13 of us. And I knew more. Over a period of time, we became like a family. We were like brothers and sisters. And when something happened to one of us, it happened to each one of us.
How did that help your determination to continue the rides? I mean, did that, I guess the real question is did that play a part in your determination to pick up the rides?
What happened in Birmingham and Anniston was a guiding force more than anything else, that we could not let the threat of violence, the beating, the burning, stop a nonviolent campaign to desegregate public transportation throughout the South.
Did it have a special meaning again for you? Did you feel kind of, especially that as you go into these meetings with the SNCC and the students in Nashville, that look, we got to do this.
What had happened had a special meaning for me because I was there. I could have been one of the people sitting out on the highway. I knew these people. I knew that they were committed, deeply committed to the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence. I knew that they were prepared to die for what they believed in. And we had to pick up where they left off. And that's what I tried to convey to the adults and to the other students in Nashville.
The rides have gone on. They've gotten the buses burned in Anniston. The people have been beaten in Birmingham. They can't get out. They finally decide we're going to suspend the rides. Tell me about the decision in Nashville to continue the rides.
It was a group of students in Nashville that had been part of the sit-in movement, part of the Nashville effort. We met on a Sunday night and we begged and we pleaded with the adults to make available to us $900. We only needed $900 to buy 10 tickets for 10 individuals, to have tickets and food to travel. Because we couldn't allow the threat of violence itself, to stop the Freedom Ride. So they made a decision, this adult group made a decision to give us to make available to us the $900. They told us if we go, we're committing suicide. We said, no, we want to go. And on Wednesday morning, May 17th, 1961, at 6:30 a.m., the 10 of us, 7 young men and 3 young women, boarded a Greyhound bus. And we traveled from Nashville, Tennessee to Birmingham, Alabama. And when we arrived at the city limit of Birmingham, Bull Connor, the police commissioner of Birmingham, met the Greyhound bus and boarded the bus, got on the bus, and saw a young black man and a young white man sitting on the front seat right behind the bus driver. One of those young people was Jim Spurg, and the other one was Paul Brooks. He told them to move. They refused to move. He arrested them, took them to the city jail. He ordered the bus driver to drive the bus to the Greyhound bus station in downtown Birmingham. Then Bull Connor asked the other police officials to look at our tickets. And our tickets read from Nashville to Birmingham, Birmingham to Montgomery, Montgomery to Jackson, Mississippi, from Jackson to New Orleans. He let the regular passenger get off the bus. He kept us on the bus. Then he ordered the local police officials to place newspaper, cardboards, to cover all of the windows, the windshield, the back, on the side, and kept us inside of the bus for more than an hour and a half.
Were you, the students in Nashville, were you scared of jail? Did jail scare you?
As participants in Nashville, we were not afraid of jail. We were set jail without bail. We had perhaps a deeper understanding of the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence more than any other student group in the South, because we had a wonderful teacher and a man named Jim Lawson. We had been taught, we had lived the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence. We believed in it. And the students in Nashville, we became the first mass arrests in the sitting movement, when almost 100 of us had been arrested in jail in 1960. We had been put out on the street to remove snow from the sidewalks.
So you were not scared of jail?
We were not scared of jail. We would sing a song about Paul and Silas bound in jail, had no money to go on their bail.
One thing that someone told us, I think it was C.T. Vivian, said that that in the meeting where SNCC in Nashville kind of decides that they're going to go on the freedom rides, that at some point he remembers you kind of taking a break, and he remembers kind of going to think about what you were going to do. And he talked about going outside and at night and looking at the stars and thinking about, you know, what you guys were in for and what you should do. Do you remember that at all?
Oh, I remember so well when the adults is trying to decide and trying to make a decision. And they would ask me from time to time, even some of the young people, so what should we do, John? And I will always come back, we got to find a way to dramatize it. Dramatize it. And so the only way that we can dramatize it, we must get on a Greyhound bus and pick up where others left off. We have to get on this bus. We have to travel.
What do you mean by dramatize it? Why?
Make it real. Use the drama. The sit-in, the stand-in at the theater, the freedom ride, it was drama. It was used to help educate, sensitize people, make it real, make it plain. That's what it was all about.
Okay, great. One of the things that happened was that Bull Connor arrests you all, you know, puts you all. So after, you know, he tapes up the stuff to the window, Bull Connor now arrests you. Talk about the fact that you know, Bull Connor arrested you.
Bull Connor take us to jail on a Wednesday afternoon. We stay in jail all night Wednesday, all day Thursday, Thursday night. We go on a hunger strike. We don't eat anything. We haven't had anything to eat since Tuesday. And then early Friday morning, he come up to our jail cell saying he's going to take us back to Nashville. And we get to the Tennessee-Alabama line. He said, I'm going to let you off here and drop us off.
When Bull Connor took you out there in the middle of the night, so he takes you out, he says he's going to Nashville, but you get in this kind of cars with him, and they're just driving in the middle of the night through, Alabama. What did you think?
I really thought when Bull Connor told us, I really did. He told us that he was going to take us back to Nashville, to our college campuses, and I thought he was going to take us back and drop us off. I remember Catherine Birch saying to him, when we get to the student union, we would have breakfast. We would have breakfast with you. And we got to the state line of Tennessee, the state line of Alabama. He said, I'm letting you off here. A bus will be coming along. You can get on a bus, you can get on a train, and dropped us off. And there was one young black man, student at Tennessee State, said, there must be some colored people here someplace. We didn't know what was going to happen. I knew it was not a good sign to be left there at night. It was Klan territory. We started walking. Now, we didn't know what had happened to Jim Spurd and Paul Brooks, the other two young people who had been arrested. We hadn't communicated with them. We didn't have any way of communicating. So we came up on an old house that was falling, knocked on the door, said, we are the Freedom Riders. Please let us in. An elderly black man came to the door, closed the door back, knocked again, said, we're the Freedom Riders. Please let us in. And this elderly woman, the wife of this man, said, honey, let him in, let him in. They brought us in, put us in a back room. There was one or two chairs, a single bed, and most of us took a seat on a single bed, others in a chair, others on the floor. It was the 7 of us, plus later a driver who came to pick us up. But it was eerie, and it was somewhat frightening, because we knew that we were probably endangering the life of these two elderly people. We told this gentleman that we hadn't had anything to eat, that we had been on a hunger strike. We gave him some money. He was so smart and so clever. He jumped in his old truck when daylight came and went around to several different places and brought bread, cold cuts, cheese, bologna, what we call simmer rolls or simmer bun, and brought it back into this back room. And that's what we had for a meal. We made a call. We made a call to Diane Nash. Told her what had happened. She told us that the other two young people, Paul Brooks and Jim Spurd, had been released from jail. And one of the young students, a young woman by the name of Celine McClellan, who was a white woman, who was a student at Vanderbilt University, or either Peabody College, that her father flew down from Buffalo, got her out of jail, and took her back. See, during those days, the jails were segregated. You get arrested together, black and white, but they put the white prison in one cell block and the blacks in another one. So we didn't know what had happened to Celine McClellan. We didn't know what had happened to Jim Spurd. But later we learned that they had been released from jail and Celine had gone back to Nashville.
Okay, so finally you get word that there's a bus.
We finally get word that there will be a bus leaving Birmingham for Montgomery. We go out to board the bus, and this white bus driver make an announcement. And he says, I have only one life to give. I'm not going to give it to CORE or the NAACP. And he refused to drive the bus. So we go back into the station and we wait for them to call another bus to Montgomery. They refused to drive. So at one time along the way, at some point along the way that night, we stayed in the station throughout the night, waiting for a bus. An angry mob marched on the bus station. The police force called out dogs to disperse the mob. Then we understand that Bobby Kennedy had negotiated with the officials of Greyhound to get us out of Birmingham. At one point, Bobby Kennedy was heard to say, "Let me speak to Mr. Greyhound. Don't you have some colored bus drivers there?" Greyhound didn't have any black bus drivers working in Birmingham, Alabama. But Bobby Kennedy was able to get an agreement that early Saturday morning, we would board a Greyhound bus. And there would be on that bus 2 officials of Greyhound, dressed in white shirts, no jacket, sitting on the front seat. And there would be a plane flying over the bus. And every 15 miles, there would be a patrol car. I became the spokesperson for that group. Most of the Freedom Riders had been up all night. So most of the people got on the bus. They went to sleep. And as we traveled the highway between Birmingham and Montgomery, you could see a patrol car. And every so often, you could see the plane. And the moment we arrived at the Greyhound bus station in downtown Montgomery, the patrol car disappeared. There was no sign of police protection. And we started down the steps of the bus. I was standing with Jim Spurd, who was my seatmate. We were the first 2 off the bus. We were riding on the front seat. When the bus pulled in, and we started down the steps, I started down the steps with Jim Spurd. An angry mob that grew to several hundred just came out of nowhere. Women, men, young people with baseball bats, with chains, with lead pipes, wooden crates, anything that could be used as a weapon. Start beating members of the media. If you had a camera, we'd just beat you. Then they turned on us, and I was hit in the head with a wooden crate, left bloody, unconscious on the streets in Montgomery. And I remember someone from the Attorney General's office coming up while I was laying down, tried to read an injunction to me, prohibiting interracial groups from traveling through the state of Alabama. The last thing I recall, standing with Jim Spurd, we both was bloody. Our clothes were soaked in blood.
So as you're lying there, half unconscious, the Attorney General of Alabama comes up and reads you an injunction? Tell me that again.
As I was lying there on the ground, the Attorney General come up and read an injunction that some judge in Alabama had issued prohibiting interracial groups from traveling through the state of Alabama by way of public transportation. The next thing I knew, I had been transferred to a local physician office where my head was patched up and bandage was put on my head. It looked like a Red Cross symbol.
It does. It actually does look like the Red Cross symbol, the way they bandage your head. Sorry to smile.
That's okay.
It's 50 years later.
Yeah.
One of the things that it just seems so ironic, you know, that you're laying there, you've been beat up, there's this mad mob raging through town, and the Attorney General now gives you an injunction for traveling in an interracial group. I just wanted to make sure we understand the irony of that.
We were an interracial group. There were young white men and women traveling with us. And they thought for some reason by traveling together, using public transportation, that we were going to inflame the good citizen of Alabama. The governor of Alabama, a man by the name of John Patterson at the time, had said to a representative of President Kennedy and Robert Kennedy that he was not going to be nursemaids and try to protect us. And there was a public safety director for the state of Alabama named Floyd Mann saying, Governor, you give me the power, you give me the authority, and I will protect these young people. I will protect them. The day while we were being beaten, Floyd Mann, the public safety director, came and stood on the scene and held his gun in the air and said, there will be no killing here today, there will be no killing here today, and dispersed the mob. He later was fired.
Talk about Patterson. I just want to talk a little bit about Patterson because, you know, one thing that about Governor Patterson is that Shuttlesworth and Martin Luther King, you know, really said that in some ways, if one person was responsible for what happened in Montgomery and what was happening in Alabama to the Freedom Riders, it was John Patterson. Why?
John Patterson and the state of Alabama sanctioned the violence against the Freedom Riders. They knew there were Klan element between Birmingham and Montgomery. They knew there were Klan element in Anniston that burned the bus, that people who had beaten people on the Trailway bus in Birmingham. They led us into a mob. That was a conspiracy on the part of the state of Alabama, and Governor Patterson was a part of it.
I'm gonna jump into the middle of the church seat. I want to talk to you about Dr. King trying to calm the crowd outside. Talk a little bit about that. As this raging mob is outside. Talk about the efforts by King to calm the crowd.
During the mass meeting, a day after the Freedom Rides arrived in Montgomery, an angry mob gathered at the First Baptist Church. There were hundreds and thousands of people inside of the church waiting to greet and salute and support those of us on the Freedom Ride. And Dr. King felt it was his call and his obligation as the leader of the movement to do what he could to calm the crowd. But an angry white group started toward the church, and when they got near the church, they started burning cars, throwing stink bombs into the church. Martin Luther King Jr. went down into the basement of the church, made a call to Robert Kennedy, and told him we had a dangerous situation here, that he had to act, he had to do something. And Robert Kennedy, the Attorney General, communicated it to his brother, President Kennedy. And that evening, Dr. King came back up to the pulpit of the church and said he had spoken to the president, rather to the Attorney General. And that the Attorney General said he would be speaking to the president. He told everybody to be orderly, that we could not engage in violence. And I remember Fred Shuttleworth, this unbelievable, brave, courageous minister who was a leader in Birmingham, coming, taking the pulpit and said the man that is more responsible for what is going on in Alabama, the violence against the Freedom Riders, is Governor John Patterson. And a few minutes later, the general of the Alabama National Guard came in and took over the meeting and said essentially what Dr. King said. It was a very dangerous, intense situation, inside and outside, in order everybody to remain in the church. So we stayed in the church all night, all of us. All of the Freedom Riders was in the choir stand. They disguised us as members of the choir because the representative of the Justice Department didn't want the local authorities from Alabama to interview us before the FBI did.
Why did Shuttlesworth feel that Patterson was responsible? What did he mean by that?
Reverend Shuttleworth felt that Governor Patterson had the power, had the authority to stop the violence on the part of the Klan element in Montgomery, in Birmingham, in Anniston, and all along the way. When he ran for governor, he had been supported by the Klan. He had influence with them, and they had influence with him. If it hadn't been for President Kennedy federalizing the Alabama National Guard, putting the city of Montgomery under martial law, some of us, or many of us, would have been killed that night.
What was the mood like before the guard is called out? You know, you have the 1,500 people or so trapped in this church. You have an angry mob outside. You have nobody but these kind of federal marshals who are, you know, postal clerks and whatever they are, deputized. You know you're not going to get any help from the local police. What was the mood like in the church that night?
The mood in the church that night, it was tense. At the same time, it was one of hope. People were singing, praying. There was a sense of faith that it was all going to work out. That somehow it was this feeling that we're in the house of the Lord and it's going to be all right. Because many of these people, they came through the bus boycott. Their churches have been bombed. Their homes have been bombed. They've been down this road before. They had been tested. They were ready.
So they weren't as scared as you might think.
They were not as scared or frightened as it would have been in some communities or neighborhoods going through this the first time. I remember that evening or early that morning when the General of the National Guard made a decision to transfer us to one home, including Dr. King and Reverend Abernathy and all of the Freedom Riders. And when I look back, it was a brave and courageous black family. The owner of this home had been a Tuskegee Airman named Dean Harris. He was a pharmacist. We all stayed at his home.
Okay. I want to ask you a couple of questions about that, but there are just one or two other things I wanted to talk about the church. Just I think one or two more things. One of the things that is fascinating in that film clip, you know, where you see Shuttlesworth and you see King, is that I think it's Shuttlesworth or King, I can't remember which one, announces that the National Guard is now going to protect the church. And people are kind of erupt in applause and start hugging. And I wanted, you know, I was wondering why, because tell me if I'm wrong, because it seems like, one, you're saved, but two, it means that now the federal government has chosen a side in the battle, you know, has been forced to choose a side. So I guess the question is, when you see this announcement and then people are hugging because the National Guard is going to come, why?
People rejoice. People express a sense of relief and happiness because they knew that the federal government has spoken from Washington. They knew that for the first time, the Kennedy administration, President Kennedy, his brother Robert Kennedy, had identified with their side, with the side of civil rights. And they also knew that they would be safe.
Great, thank you. At Harris's house, there's this effort to persuade Martin Luther King to be part of the Freedom Rides. Tell me about that.
We had several discussions, several meetings with Dr. King and James Farmer, Fred Shuttleworth, and many others. And we wanted to continue the ride. And we wanted Dr. King to go on the ride. There's a great photograph, a great picture when we boarded the bus to leave the city of Montgomery. And we wanted Dr. King to be with us. But he felt he could not go because he had a charge back in Georgia, back in Atlanta. And to get arrested and go to jail again, he would revoke his bail. But he wanted to identify with the ride. It's a picture of him shaking hands with one of the riders through the window of a bus as the bus pulled out from Montgomery to go to Jackson, Mississippi.
You have an interesting passage in your book, and I think it says a lot about, more about the students and, you know, where they were, and I'd love for you to talk about it, if you would, than it does about Martin Luther King, I think, where, you know, as he refuses or says he cannot go on the ride, there's a real sense of disappointment in Martin Luther King. And you talk in your book about hearing for the first time somebody mutters the phrase, "the Lord." Tell me about that, about the sense of disappointment that Martin Luther King won't go on the ride.
Many of the young people, many of us were disappointed that Dr. King made the decision not to go on the ride, because we wanted him to go with us. No, I had never been to Mississippi before. Alabama was one thing, Georgia something else, but going to Mississippi, we knew what happened to Emmett Till. Some of us were about the same age that Emmett Till would have been. And we thought we needed the protection. We needed an international known spokesperson, a leader like Dr. King to be with us. But we used to sing a song, "If you don't go, don't hinder me. I'm going anyhow." So we were determined to go. And we got on that Greyhound bus. And we traveled from Montgomery to Jackson.
I'm gonna ask you. I'm gonna go back because I want to. You know, there's some things that as you know, happened on that ride. But talk about you know, that muttering of that term "the Lord" and this kind of, you know, that you hear for the first time when King says he's not going to go.
There was some young people within the movement on the Freedom Ride. Some SNCC people started referring to Dr. King as the Lord, that he was bigger than any of us, and he was the Lord. I never called him the Lord because I had so much respect and affection and love for the man that I refused to call him the Lord.
When they called him the Lord, what did they mean? Was that
he was the Lord? He was higher. He was powerful. He was beyond us.
It's kind of a sarcastic term.
Yes, facetious, sarcastic. Yes.
Do you remember? Talk about what you remember about the trip into Jackson from Montgomery. One of the things that's fascinating about it to me is that, you know, at each point there's like more and more protection or whatever until finally at this point now you got National Guard people on the bus with you. You know, you've got, you know, there's just, you know, it looks like when you see that bus pulling out, it just looks like, you know, an armed camp or something. You know, talk about that trip. What you remember about it?
When we left the Montgomery bus station, there was National Guard soldiers on the bus, riding with us, in front of the bus, leading us. There were National Guard individuals behind the bus. And when we got to the Mississippi state line, the Mississippi National Guard picked us up. Some got on the bus, some behind the bus, some in front of the bus, and took us to Jackson, to the Greyhound bus station in downtown Jackson. You get to Jackson, you go into the so-called white waiting room, marked white waiting. Most of the blacks, freedom riders, would go into the so-called white waiting room. The so-called white freedom riders would go into the so-called colored waiting room. And sometimes it would be an integrated group. We would mix each other, mix them up. We get inside, there was a captain. His name was Ray, Captain Ray. And Captain Ray would say one word, or maybe two words. He would say, move on. You can be trying to get something to eat at a lunch counter. You weren't going to be served, but you go and take a seat at a lunch counter. Or maybe you would go to a shoe shine stand and try to get a shoe shine. They weren't going to shine your shoes. Or you would go to the restroom and try to use the restroom. And Captain Ray was with you every moment of the way. And the only word he would use, he would say, move on. In the next breath, he would say, you're under arrest. And he arrested all of us and took us to the city jail in Jackson. And during the summer of 1961, throughout that period, people kept coming to Jackson by way of bus, by way of train. We filled the city jail, then they would take us to the county jail. And when the county jail was full, early one morning, they decided to take the first group down to the state penitentiary at Parchman. I was in the very first group, walking with James Farmer and others. You saw this line of people going down to Parchman. I'd never been to Mississippi before. I'd never been to the Delta of Mississippi. It was eerie. They took us to the maximum security unit of Parchman State Penitentiary, where you see all of this barbed wire. They stopped this van with black and white males, because the jails are segregated. They don't put you in the same jail cell, not in the same unit, but they had us all together. And you get to the prison, oh God, get out with his gun, his rifle drawn. And he says something like, sing your goddamn freedom songs now. We have niggers here that will beat you up or eat you up. Sing your goddamn freedom songs now. They led us into a hallway. They had all of us to strip naked. Had all these guys standing there without any clothes and all, which attempt to dehumanize us, rob us of any sense of dignity or any sense of pride. We stood there for more than 45 minutes, maybe almost an hour. Then they led us to a shower. And if you, in twos, and if you had any facial hair, a mustache, a beard, they would give you a razor while you were taking your shower, and you had to shave the hair off of you. And after you finish your shower and your shaving, they led us in twos to a jail cell without any clothing, the rifles drawn on us. There were several men with rifles by this time. And we stayed in the cells for more than an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. Then they came and gave us a pair of Mississippi State Penitentiary shorts and an undershirt. That's what we kept on.
So in some ways, sending you all to Parchman was kind of an intimidating tactic. You know, Parchman has this reputation as being the worst prison in the United States. And talk about how in some ways that backfired on Mississippi, that in some ways you all became more united. It kind of forged this steel, and that it became this, and some people have called it a university. So I guess the question would be, what happened at Parchman?
Parchman became a way out not just a way in. We was not just locked up, and we had moments there to learn, to teach each other the way of nonviolence, the way of love, the way of peace, the way of nonviolent direct action. They refused to provide us with books and papers, but I do remember being there. There's a man came by one day from the Salvation Army, and he gave us all a Bible. It was the songs and the New Testament. I remember one of my old schoolmates wrote in the Bible, given to John Robert Lewis by a man from the Salvation Army on June something, 1961. We read the Bible, but we talked about Gandhi and his campaign in South Africa, his campaign to liberate India from the British. We talked about Thoreau and civil disobedience, the great religions of the world, about what Dr. King had been all about, and what we were going to do when we got out, to engage in a massive campaign to get people registered to vote. We learned as much as we possibly could about the state of Mississippi, sharing ideas, sharing feelings. Because there was lawyers, there was ministers, there were rabbis and teachers with all type of background, and students from all over America that came to go on the Freedom Ride. So we learned from each other. It did become a university. And because of the Freedom Ride, we were prepared to not just liberate Mississippi, but liberate the whole South. The state of Mississippi in 1961 had a black voting age population of more than 450,000, and only about 16,000 were registered to vote. And we wanted to do something about it.
What was the reputation of Parchman?
Parchman was known as a land that no man wanted to travel to. It was known as a vicious and not friendly place for people. That they would send people out to do hard, bright, back-breaking work in the fields. But they were afraid to send us out, to integrate us, to let us mingle with the regular prisoners. So they kept us in. And one Sunday morning, Ross Barnett, the governor of Mississippi at the time, and several other white officials came by like they were touring us. It was almost like we were in a zoo or something. And they would come in and just peep at us. We would sing our freedom songs. We would conduct church. We would pray prayers. And we were determined that we weren't going to let anything get us down. We kept the faith. We kept our eyes on the prize. And we would not give up. And they would not break our spirit.
Mm-hmm. You just reminded me of something that I wanted to ask earlier. Is one of the things that Bull Connor says is that singing in that when he arrested you all the first time, that singing just drove him crazy, and he had to talk about the singing and why and what its effect would be on the jailers. And
singing, the music became a powerful nonviolent instrument, a powerful nonviolent tool, a powerful nonviolent weapon. And I often say, without music, without the singing, we would have lost a sense of solidarity. It gave us hope in a time of hopelessness. It brought us together. And you can hear the young women singing, and then we would start singing back to them. Someone would throw out a verse. Someone would improvise. And it created an unbelievable sense, yes, we will make it. Yes, we will survive. And that nothing but nothing was going to stop this movement. And sometimes you will hear people singing and seem like the music was going to just shake the jail. When you were marching through the streets of Nashville, or through the streets of Birmingham, or Selma, or Albany, Georgia, or Atlanta, it was not just singing outside, but also inside. And I think the music, the words, had a profound impact on the guards, on the jailers, and I think it helped change some of these men.
I want kind of winding down. I want, if you had to say one thing and try not, we were trying not to make a list. We were talking about the accomplishments of the Freedom Rides. What was it? You say? I mean, you say that this was one of the kind of unsung stories of the civil rights movement. You know, one of the big stories of the civil rights movement that we really haven't investigated. What was it that the Freedom Rides accomplished?
The Freedom Rides of 1961 desegregated public transportation all across the American South. In a very short time, by the fall of 1961, those signs that said white waiting, white men, white women, colored women, those signs came tumbling down. It ended forever segregation in public transportation. So today, when a young child or some older person get on a bus and travel from Chicago to Jackson, Mississippi, or from Washington, D.C. to New Orleans, they will not see those signs. Those signs are gone, and they will not return. The only place they will see those signs will be in a museum, in a book, or on a video. You can sit any place you want to and travel any place you want to go, as long as you have the money to pay for the ticket.
So in some...
But it also carried the movement. It took the civil rights movement off the college campuses, took it off out of the large cities and took it to the small towns and rural communities. And it also changed the people that were on the Freedom Ride. The people that took a seat on these buses, that went to jail in Jackson, that went to Parchman, they were never the same.
Why is that important? You know, that these people were never the same. You know, I want to try to say that you know, I think the idea is also that those people were changed and they went out and changed other people, and they went out and did other things. So, you know, it's not just that 300 people were changed, but that also, they become the catalyst for more change.
The Freedom Riders became change agents, or agents of change. They left Mississippi. Many did. Some went back. They became activists for voter registration, political organizing. Some went to Southwest Georgia and created a movement. Others went to Selma, Alabama. Some went to North Carolina and South Carolina and created movements. And today there's a whole cadre of people that went out and taught others to be agents of change.
And that came from Freedom Riders?
It came from the Freedom Rides, because people saw what they could do in such a short time, that they can bring about victories. And they felt they could get other people to be participant in an effort to bring about victory, to bring about social change, political changes.